Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to a Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading week from the 10th until the 16th of May. I read a total of 9 books this week, 2,555 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 177 books. The reading challenges I was participating in this week included the Bookemon Readathon Round 3, and also I think I covered off on a couple of Romanceopoly challenges throughout the week as well. And I think that's pretty much all of my announcements, so let's dive into the books that I read this week. The first book will probably have a few of you rolling your eyes at me, but I did read The Hayden Game by Sally Thorne for the 3rd time this year. I was actually rereading it for my staff's book club just so that I could remember in depth some of my thoughts about it. This is a 2016 release from William Morrow. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is an enemies to lovers office romance. It is delightful. I won't talk about it much because I've already spoken about it twice this year and you'll probably hear about it again. Then I read The Deck of Omens by Christine Lynn Herman. This is the second and I think final book in the Devouring Grey duology. I could be wrong in that, but it seemed like it was relatively well concluded by the end of this book. It is a 2020 release from Hyperion and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Overall, this felt just a little lackluster compared to The Devouring Grey. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this series, it is set in a small town in the US that was originally settled by a group of founding families, which always gave me Vampire Diaries vibes. We follow the descendants of these founders. So we have May and Justin Hawthorne, Isaac Sullivan, Violet Saunders, and Harper Carlyle, and they went through a whole bunch of stuff in the first book. And essentially this town is surrounded by this fog mist sort of thing, and it's sort of like this gateway into a parallel sort of world. And inside this mist there is a beast that hunts people from the town. And the founding families are the ones who keep the town safe from the mist. It is YA urban fantasy. It has magic and monsters and all sorts of betrayal. Honestly, it's just fun. I like urban fantasy, and this, even though I was disappointed with the way that it probably ended, I still enjoyed the story overall and the characters. So yeah, it's nice to tick off another series. I also read Who Am I by Anita Hess. This is part of My Australian Story series. This was originally published in 2001. This is a 2020 release. I think they are redoing the covers on all of the My Australian Story books, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This was sent to me for review by Scholastic, so thank you very much to them. This is the fictional diary of Mary Talents, who was a young Aboriginal girl who was part of the Stolen Generation. This tracks her journey from the time she's about 10 years old. She has been living in an Aboriginal children's home for 5 years after being taken from her family, and on her 10th birthday she's gifted a journal, and so she starts documenting everything that happens to her. And it follows her from the children's home to being adopted by a white family who basically tell her that she has to forget her past because she has skin fair enough to pass as white, but she's not white and she's not treated like she is white, but she's expected to behave like them. And so obviously this has a whole lot of issues that are part of Australia's history, which is really, really tragic and just maddening and upsetting to think about. But it is done in such a beautiful way. And Mary Talents is quite a strong, young female character. She faces racism and bullying, but she also is determined in her quest to find out information on her past and her heritage, and it is just a wonderful middle grade read. I forgot to say, I was participating in a third. This is what happens when I forget to make notes. I was participating in a 3rd readathon, so I was participating in the Books for the Brave readathon. The Deck of Omens was for the challenge with a book that had NHS in the title. This was for a book about a brave main character, and I have my 3rd book coming in a minute. I also read Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross. This is a 2020 Kindle release. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was a delightfully fun and funny read. It is an adult paranormal romance story. It is a shifter story. It is a shifter romance, and it features vampires and shifters and witches, and it is set in New Orleans, and it is just so fun. I had the best time reading this book. We follow 2 main characters, Mateo Cruz, who is a wolf shifter, and in this world, wolf shifters, when they're human is in control. When they are in wolf form, the wolf is in control, which I know is a very common trope, but in this case, Mateo has been cursed by someone, he doesn't know who, to be unable to shift, and as a result his wolf personality, which goes by the name of Alpha, talks to him in his head because he can't get out. His only outlet is to talk to Mateo, and so the two are just going crazy because they're stuck in each other's heads when normally they would sort of be separate entities. They have the most hilarious conversations the entire way through the book. It is I can't even describe it. It was just fun. In order to try and resolve the curse, Mateo goes to one of the local witch covens and seeks the help of Evie Savoy, who is a curse breaker. But the Savoy witch clan has traditionally not dealt with werewolves. They've had bad history with them. But eventually Evie feels a lot of sympathy for Mateo's plight and tries to get her sisters to help her and Mateo resolve the curse. And along the way, Mateo realizes that being around Evie, there's something about being around Evie that helps alleviate the very dominant personality of Alpha in his head. And the two begin spending more time together. I like the magic. I like the setting of New Orleans. I just really like this different take on sort of that paranormal world that I haven't read before. Not to say that it's not out there, but it's the first time I've read it. And it was just really fun. I don't know how many times I said fun in that review, so I apologise. I also read Deadly Drama by Jodie Holford. This is the 4th book in the Britton Bay Mysteries series. It is a cozy mystery series that I review on NetGalley. It is a 2020 release from Lyrical Press. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. There is just something really delightfully comforting about this series. So it is a NetGalley review. In the Britton Bay Mystery series, we follow Molly Owens, who has moved to the town of Britton Bay, which is a little seaside town. And she's the editor-in-chief of the Britton Bay Bulletin, the local newspaper. And she always finds herself getting into all sorts of trouble and usually being the first on the scene when someone is murdered. 4 books in, she has settled into life living in the town. She's got her boyfriend Sam, who is delightful. She's built up a great friendship group and she has a lovely little cottage by the seaside and a gorgeous little dog, and everything's going really well. And the book opens as the town is beginning to prepare for the very first theatre production in the town's history. When Molly goes to try and interview the very elusive, very abrasive production director, who is a former actress, she's one of the first to discover that the director has been murdered, and everything sort of goes from there, and Molly gets involved in trying to solve the mystery of who actually killed the director. I'm hit and miss with cozy mysteries, but this is one that I really love. I really like the characters and the setting, so I keep going back to it, and I always enjoy myself when I do. Next, I read Fire on the Ice by Tamsin Parker. This is book 4 in the Snow and Ice Games series, which I think can all be read as standalones, but they all interconnect. It is a 2018 release from Swerve. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is a novella, I'm pretty sure, and I read it because I heard it reviewed on the Fated Mates podcast, because it was a female-female sports romance, which I haven't seen very many of those. In this story, we follow Blaise Bellamy, who is a short track speed skater, and she is very much one for attention. She goes out of her way to get the media's attention in any way possible. And then we also have Maisie Harper, who is a figure skater and is very quiet, reserved, and doesn't really let the press in on any of her personal life. 4 years ago at the previous Snow and Ice Games, the two had a brief relationship and they haven't seen each other for 4 years, but now that they're back at this year's games, they are very keen to sort of renew that relationship. And this causes a little bit of friction because Blaise likes to be in the spotlight, Maisie really doesn't. A lot of things happen and they're sort of forced to acknowledge and work out sort of this happy medium in their relationship. So in this story, Maisie identifies as a lesbian and Blaise is polyamorous and bisexual, I'm pretty sure. So it was a really interesting combination, one I hadn't seen for a while. So yeah, it was interesting. But be warned, this is a very, very steamy book. Then I read The Viennese Girl by Jenny LaCote, which was the 3rd book that I read for the Books for the Brave readathon. This is a 2020 release from Allen and Unwin. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did receive it as a review copy unsolicited from Allen and Unwin, so thank you very much to them. It is a World War II historical, possibly romance book, but it's mostly historical fiction. And I was very apprehensive about picking this one up because I don't always do so well with historical fiction books, but honestly this one was just a pretty easy read. And it starts in 1940 when Hedy Berku, who is a Viennese girl or a Viennese Jew who escaped Austria at the start of the war and has moved to Jersey. She's been there for a couple of years now, and then all of a sudden the Germans invade and take control of Jersey Island, and she has to confront a lot of her fears. And in order to survive, she ends up taking on a job as a translator for the German army, which is something that causes her personal stress because she doesn't want to be involved in any way with them, given her history. In the end, she begins to embark on small acts of resistance like stealing fuel coupons from her workplace and redistributing them in the town. She also crosses paths with Kurt Newman, who is a German lieutenant, and he really forces her to see that not every German soldier is exactly the same, and that some of them had no choice in becoming part of the army, and they did that in order to survive, and they still have their own thoughts. It was a really interesting read. When I do read historical fiction, I do tend to read World War II historical fiction. It's always nice to get a different perspective. I never would have read it if they hadn't sent it to me, so I can thank them for pushing me outside my comfort zone. And then I finally read Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the first novel in the Witcher saga, and I'm so glad that I did. I really wanted to read it and I've been putting it off. So this was originally published in 2009 by Galance. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This has been translated from the original Polish, and it follows Geralt of Rivia and Ciri, and after Geralt and Ciri found each other in the short stories that I read back in the start of January, he originally takes her to be trained as a witcher, decide that her being there is not safe for her, so they also take her to one of the schools, and she is trained as a lady, and then also Yennefer becomes involved and helps train her magic. Meanwhile, Geralt is going off on all these sort of adventures. There's a whole lot of political machinations going on in the background, and everyone is sort of preparing for another war. So the whole thing was great. The one thing I really like about it is all the conversations and the dialogue. There's a lot of conversation that goes on, and I love that in books. Quite often you get lots of lengthy descriptions of what's going on and who's there and whatever. This just literally has a whole lot of dialogue, which I really like. I did struggle a bit with keeping track of the places and the people. A lot of them, I think if you watched my vlog, I talked about how watching the TV show actually helped me because I could recognize some of the names, so I could start putting a name to the face, and that made it a little bit easier for me to track in here. So we'll see how that goes later on in later books. I'm thinking I might read maybe 1 book a month. That might be my goal, but we'll see how I go. So I did enjoy it. I'm eager to continue. I mean, I don't often rate fantasy very highly anyway, but 3.5 is pretty good for me. So yes, I'm eager to continue this. The last book I read was His Forbidden Desire by Katie Robert, because what's a week now when I don't read a Katie Robert book? This is the first book in the Island of Ease, I think, or it could be the Island of Wise, but I think it's the Island of Ease. It is a 2019 release from Trinkets and Tales LLC, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is actually a spin-off of the Thelanian Dynasty books, which I've read the first novella for, but have not yet continued, and I didn't realize that going into it, but you don't really have to have read those books to read this spin-off series. It's fine, you can go into it and still sort of get the general gist. In this book, we follow Princess Camilla Fitzcharles, who is the youngest sibling and princess of Thelania, and she really doesn't like that sort of role. She really wants to escape this sort of gilded cage that she lives in. She's just not happy being a princess. As such, she secures an invitation to participate in the Wild Hunt, which is an event that takes place every 5 years on the Island of Ease, hosted by the 4 Horsemen, these figures with great power who have taken on the mantle of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And the Wild Hunt is a deadly game where people basically fight it out to capture the white stag in order to earn a favour from death. One of the Horsemen, Famine, is a former Thelanian noble who was kidnapped as a child and forced to endure some really horrific things. When he crosses paths with Cammy, he can't believe that she's there. He doesn't believe that she should be there. He thinks that she's very soft and weak and should have no part in the Wild Hunt. He's forced to confront that belief when Cammy is named the White Stag for the event and is the person that everyone will be hunting, and things sort of go from there. It's only about 260 pages. It's not very long, but it was very interesting and entertaining, and I liked the idea of these 4 Horsemen characters who basically treat each other like siblings because they all endured the same sort of horrific childhood after being kidnapped by this mysterious organization. There's a bit of mystery, there is a bit of the Hunger Games and survivalist sort of stuff going on, and it was just, yeah, it was delightful, and I enjoy Katie Roberts' work. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading them in the future. I would love to know. Alternatively, feel free to let me know what you have been reading over the last 7 days. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are having an excellent day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.